It's Monday, January 14th, 2019, and I'm your host, Paula Hersey. On Barnstable Today, we deep dive into financial forecasting, learn more about becoming a coastal resilient community, and get a dredging update from Katuah Bay. First up, municipal and community news and notes. Massachusetts communities will be reimbursed more than $1.1 million for the unfunded costs of early voting in the 2018 general election. State Auditor Suzanne Bump surveyed city and town clerks to add up the costs associated with early voting in the midterm elections and whether if any of those costs could be considered an unfunded mandate. The money for the reimbursements will come from funding allocated to the State Secretary William Galvin's office in a supplemental budget passed late last year. Galvin said that as the state works to expand early voting and increase voter access and convenience, it needs to make sure local election officials are given the resources they need to hold successful elections. One of the tools the town uses in its budget process is the 5-year financial forecast. The document is not a spending plan, but helps in identifying trends. How does a town know how much money they need to run? With me today, Director of Finance, Mark Milne, and we're going to talk about the 5-year forecast for finances. Talking just before our interview, there's some fascinating details here. Stay with me, folks. Really, math is fun. Right?
Yes.
So first off, what is this document? It's on the website. It's called the 5-year forecast for finance. What is this document?
Yeah, it's the documents to be used to help us understand revenue and expenditure trends over the past 10 years and how they might project out over the next 5-year period. It's not meant to be interpreted as a spending plan for the next 5 years. This is where we're going to spend our resources. It's more of just of a tool to help us identify where we may have some structural imbalances going forward, based on the level of services that we provide today and what the costs of those services are projected to be over the next 5-year period. We don't make any assumptions to the changes in service levels. That can change from year to year.
Right. So let's back up a little bit and talk about the previous 5 years. So you're now on the next 5-year cycle. What did you see trend-wise that came through on your 5-year forecast 5 years ago?
Sure. We saw that new property taxes from new property growth was greater than what we anticipated under the last forecast. The economy has recovered from the Great Recession, of course, and we're 10 years out from that recession, and so things have been improving. So we've seen improving revenue sources across the board. New growth, new property tax growth, state aid has grown as the state's fiscal condition has improved. We've seen some considerable increases in state aid. We've also seen significant increases in our motor vehicle excise tax revenue as the auto industry has enjoyed some of their greatest growth in decades under the last 5 years. And our permitting revenue from building permits, gas permits, and so forth, we've seen record growth in that area as well.
So this forecasting and these trends, as you look back and then forward, some of these things were directly related to the Great Recession, and now with all of these industries rebounding, the revenues are increasing. What do you see as you move forward into the 5 years now that it seems things are kind of stable?
Yes, I don't anticipate that we'll be able to be able to replicate what's happened over the past 5 years, because I think we're at a point now where I think we can maintain what we've seen as far as growth, but to duplicate that growth over the next 5 years period would be a very significant challenge, I think. Right. However, we are more optimistic going forward than we were the last 5-year forecast, because we have seen some strength in the economy, and that's affected all those revenue categories that I mentioned before, as well as our revenue generated from beaches as well. We're seeing a lot of visitors come to the town and enjoying those natural resources that we have. And so we're a little bit conservative in our projections going forward, but we need to be, because we have to be in a position to plan for the next recession if and when it does occur.
Right. And you talk about forecasts. What are some of the categories in this forecast?
Well, on the expenditure side, the largest one by far is employee costs. Between salaries and employee benefits, it's approximately 80% of the overall operating expenditures for the town. And that's not unusual for a municipality because we're in a service providing field. And so, we try to project out what the salaries and then benefits are going to be. And we know employee benefits typically increase at a higher percentage rate than inflation in other areas of the operating budget, and so that's just a given. That's where we are, and that's not unique to Barnstable. That's everywhere. Healthcare costs are significant, and there's limited steps that we can take at a local level to control those healthcare cost increases. It'll take steps at the federal and state level to really rein in the cost of healthcare services.
Right. And when we look at the trends and forecasts, and then you start to do budgets, so, it takes a lot of work to do a document like this, I would imagine, right? Lots of different formulas and things like that. So once this is complete, how is it used?
Well, we use it as a guide a couple of different ways. First, to develop our budget for the subsequent fiscal year. So we're looking at fiscal year 20 right now, and we're using this document as a guide to help us prepare our revenue estimates for fiscal year 20 as well as our expenditure estimates. We're busy costing out the true cost of those expenditures now as more data is coming available to us. But we also use it, we try to use it as a tool for priority setting and strategic planning. We provide a document to the council as well and to the administration so that they can get a sense as to where's the town's financial condition heading towards over the next 5 years, and how should we take that information and use it for our strategic planning purposes. So it's really a tool that helps assist us in those areas.
Right, and strategic planning is really critical to municipalities because there's so many variables out there that can change, that as you do these plans, there's contingency plans as well.
Right. Yes. Yeah. You have to be resilient. You need to be. You have to be in a position to be able to react in the event if something unplanned were to happen. So we've. As indicated in that document, we do have a number of reserves available for us at our disposal to help mitigate any potential unanticipated events that may occur, hopefully creating a more soft landing, so to speak. If something negative were to happen, we wouldn't have to immediately make a significant reduction to the operating budget someplace. We can do it over a period of time, creating a softer landing if we were in a position where we had to make reductions as a result of another recession.
Right. And who is it just you that works on this, or is there a team, and where does that data aggregate?
Yeah, a lot of the data is collected by a financial budget analyst, Nathan Empey. He does a significant amount of work on this project with direction from me, but he does most of the number crunching, the spreadsheet development, and all of that. So yeah, he plays a significant role in this, and we couldn't do it without Nathan's efforts. He does a fantastic job for us.
Yeah, and all that data source, that's from different departments that are mostly collections, I would imagine, right? Through your beach permits and recreation and those kinds of things. So they have to take all of the things that have come in through the past 5 years or so to say, hey, what does this look like now?
Yeah, we fortunately we have a financial management system that tracks all of this data over a 10-year period, so we can go back into that system and draw a lot of information out of there. And so that's what Nathan does. He takes a lot of the information out of our financial systems for the past 10 years and uses that to project over the next 5 years. So the history of the data that is needed is available in a lot of in different formats in different areas, but most of it is right in our Munis financial system that Nathan he gets it from that, mostly there.
There must be some pretty cool pivot tables in there.
Oh yeah, pivot tables. Yeah. Yes, Nathan is a very strong Microsoft Excel user, and he has all those tricks of the trade that he uses to analyze that that information. So
that's amazing. as a data junkie myself, I can't imagine having that much data at your fingertips and then having to put it into a document that the town council can read, and that residents, if they choose to, can read this document to really understand how the town plans for the future.
Yeah, yeah. You don't want to see the stuff behind the scenes. That's where it gets real confusing. But it does help us. We do take a look at it, and we try to create some what we refer to as sensitivity analysis, so that if this were to happen, what would be the impact on fund balance, let's say, over here. And so Nathan has a lot of spreadsheets set up so that we can analyze situations like that.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff. See, I told you, folks, math is fun, right? Anything else you want to add to let residents know?
This is a fluid document. We update it every single year. And so, next year there'll be another 5-year forecast. It used to be 10 years, but the longer you go out, the less accurate the numbers get. And so the council actually this is a charter requirement that this document be produced every year. So the council made a change to the charter last year that reduced it from 10-year to 5-year, just because the accuracy of the numbers tend to go away as the longer you go out. And we live in such a dynamic environment these days that you have to be ready to act and react and anticipate things. So we felt that going to a 5-year forecast would be just better for everyone.
Right. Required reading, folks. It's on the website, townofbarnstable.us. You can download it and take a look at it. And thanks so much for your work on it.
You're welcome.
How do you build resilient coastal communities facing the rising concerns of climate change? Elizabeth Jenkins, Director of Planning and Development, takes a deep dive into mitigation, municipal vulnerability, and the tools and resources available to the town to plan for an uncertain future. It's all about the water, or is it about coastal resiliency? It can be both. With me today, Director of Planning and Development, Elizabeth Jenkins. There's so much talk about coastal resiliency and what are we going to do with climate and change and our coastline. And you said we have 100 plus miles of coastline.
170 miles of coastline just here in Barnstable alone.
Just here in Barnstable. So there's a lot to talk about with coastal resiliency. We're going to break it down into 3 things today. So first up is hazard mitigation plans. Talk to us about those.
Sure. So this is kind of a statewide planning framework that encourages municipalities to look at the natural hazards that impact your community, and really a full range of things, not just coastal resiliency issues, and certainly those are primary here in Barnstable, but flooding, storm surge, even things like drought and wildfire we take a look at. And it asks us to really evaluate where our risks and vulnerabilities are related to these natural hazards. And, of course, we spend a lot of time in terms of preparedness, response, what to do if one of these events happen. But what can we do from a planning perspective? Again, knowing that there is risk here in a coastal community, that we are going to experience these events. What kind of investments can we make as a community to help buffer ourselves from the impacts of these hazards? What can we do to plan ahead for them so when they do happen, we bounce back a little bit easier and we're protecting ourselves ahead of time? So this is our hazard mitigation plan. It's a plan that we update on a regular basis every 5 years. It's time to update ours again. So we've been going through the process again to kind of reevaluate our risks and hazards and develop an action plan across the town to think about how can we begin to mitigate these risks. And if we do this and we have this plan in place, then the state rewards that by making grant funding opportunities available to implement the actions that we've identified in the plan.
So some of these actions, and again, when we talk about mitigation, it's not adaptation, it's mitigation. This is like trying to stop what's already going to come down anyways.
Right.
So, this could be any kind of storm in the winter, it could be a hurricane, it could be any number of things. So when you start to look at some of those plans, what are some of the areas that you're concerned with from an economic development and a coastal resiliency, north side, south side?
Sure, in terms of geography in town. So again, we've been doing obviously climate preparedness planning, whether it's formally or informally, here for a long time. So when you go and you talk to our residents, you talk to our emergency officials, and you see, obviously we have the most vulnerability along our coastlines. On the North Shore, it's really kind of in the Commerce Road area. I know we've had a lot of conversations about that as a community. A lot of the north side is sheltered by Sandy Neck, which is a barrier beach, but that area is, it doesn't get that protection from that Sandy Neck barrier beach. So it becomes very vulnerable in terms of flooding that comes both from the inland marshes as well as from the ocean. And then the south side, another barrier beach, we have the Long Beach barrier beach, which is in that case a developed barrier beach. We're very fortunate that Sandy Neck on the north side is a preserved and undeveloped barrier beach, so functions in a very natural way. But on the south side, the Long Beach barrier beach is a developed barrier beach, has a lot of real estate developed there. So we see a lot of vulnerability there, and really up through that whole Centerville River system, a lot of flood zone and vulnerable properties there. Especially those kind of small historic homes that may not have been invested in and developed up out of the floodplain. So there, and then we do see kind of areas more urban in character, especially around the kind of Hyannis Port into the Hyannis Inner Harbor area, where again we just see a lot more density of people in development that are very vulnerable in terms of storm surge and hurricanes as well.
So you get this plan done, and the state's going to give out grants to do specific things, but it's the municipal vulnerability preparedness.
Yeah.
So, let's give everything a really long name, but we'll just call it MVP, right?
Right.
So what is that about? What are these granting opportunities?
Yeah, so MVP is kind of similar. It was part of Governor Baker's $300 million commitment to addressing climate change and coastal resiliency issues here in Massachusetts. So this was a grant opportunity that the Baker-Polito administration made available to cities and towns across the Commonwealth. We were one of, I think, 82 cities awarded in the second round of grants, and we were allowed entry to participation in this program, Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness MVP program. And what this does is it's similar to the hazard mitigation planning framework that the state asks us to do, but it takes it a step forward a little bit and asks us not just to look at the hazards that we've faced historically as a community, but ones that we expect to face in light of things like rising sea levels and climate change. So in working with some of the kind of state-sponsored research that's gone on around that, integrating that into our preparedness and response planning here in town, and thinking about our infrastructure impacts, but also our environmental impacts and our social impacts of climate change going forward. So what this process is essentially it will engage interested parties. If anybody's interested, please contact us in a comprehensive one-day workshop that looks to evaluate this. Again, really understanding what our risks and vulnerabilities are, and looking at it through these different and multiple lenses, and then beginning to develop and prioritize actions and responses to that. And much like the hazard mitigation plan, by doing this and completing this process allows us access to a second round of action grants to implement the actions identified in the plan.
Right. So Massachusetts and Governor Baker's administration has really literally taken this climate change and coastal resiliency opportunities and challenges to heart, has funded a lot of different things, has also funded a pilot program for the town of Barnstable.
Yeah, and that comes from a little bit of a different place. That's actually federal funding.
Okay.
It comes from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and that was actually a grant that was given to our regional planning agency, the Cape Cod Commission, to look at, again, we're a coastal community, understanding what our impacts are, and this project, I think, and the name's going to escape me because they're all so similar.
Right.
The Resilient Cape Cod, the Resilient Cape Cod, a regional project. Again, the Resilient Cape Cod project looks at what are the coastal impacts from flooding, storm surge, and coastal erosion. So kind of the three major impacts that we see on the coast. And what are potential responses to that we're going to have as a region, and also, looking at that on a neighborhood scale. And what are the impacts of those decisions from an environmental perspective, from an economic perspective, on our property values and tax base? And it allows us to think about our responses, again, our responses being a wide range of things in terms of building infrastructure or changing the way we develop, putting new regulations in place, things like that. And what are the kind of follow-on impacts of that from those different perspectives? So this is a project that the Commission's been working on. They've been kind of in the early phases of that, developing out this matrix of different responses with scientists and other sort of experts across the Cape, and putting it together into what they call a decision support tool that'll help take all this kind of information and economic analysis. They've engaged an environmental economist actually to look at the impacts of applying these different solutions, climate solutions. And they've developed this into a tool. And Barnstable is going to be our pilot community where we go out and test this tool and see what kind of values that certainly making these different decisions will have on our community.
So it's kind of one of those things where, chicken and egg, right? So you want to try something, but you don't want to implement it unless you know that it's going to work.
Right.
But coastal resiliency is one of those things where you don't have a lot of time. It seems like every year there's more doom and gloom, there's more sea level rise. From an economic development standpoint, how do you balance that with growth?
Yeah.
And especially on our coastlines. Like I said, there's a lot of coastline. Some of it's preserved already, like the Sandy Neck area, but there's decisions that have to come through the town to kind of look at this as a whole now and say, what are we going to do?
Absolutely, and so if I'm an individual homeowner, certainly, we have a lot of investment on our coastlines. People love living near the water. It's beautiful. It's why they're here on Cape Cod. We have a lot of high value real estate on our coastlines, and these properties are kind of on the front lines having to make these decisions of what do I do with this major investment that I have, and how do I respond to the fact that Cape Cod is a place that's changing, that's not staying the same, on a very basic level, and that's what this decision support tool is really there to help people understand is as a community and both as individuals that we really need to be cognizant of the different options that are out there, the full scale of options, and thinking about how it affects us economically. If we choose to armor a coastline, that's going to have impacts on a recreational beach. That's a mile down the road. You're not letting those natural processes happen. If that sand isn't getting through, then how does that impact us as a community that values recreation and where recreation and tourism is a big part of what we do. So
and what do seawalls look like?
Right, versus restoring wetlands.
Right.
So that full kind of scale of different options that are out there, and really, on a big level, trying to understand the impacts of that decision making. So they're big choices, and I think the idea here is to start to educate people about what the responses are, and again, start to think about these cost value trade-offs of these big decisions that we're going to have to make as a coastal community.
Right, sooner rather than later. So let's talk timeline.
Yeah. So with the MVP process, again, that's a community engagement process. We are working with the Commission and Barnstable County Cooperative Extension to do that. They're great partners with climate change planning and coastal resiliency planning with us already. Our goal is to hold that session before the end of the year, so probably sometime early December. And then to hold some follow-up sessions on the Resilient Cape Cod support tool at the beginning of next year. So if people want to get involved, we'll post all this information up on our Planning and Development Department website. We have a coastal resiliency and climate change page that we're developing. So if people are interested, developing a clearinghouse there for people to learn more.
Excellent information today. Thank you so much, Elizabeth.
Yeah, thank you, Paula.
Funding from the Baker administration this past summer and a shovel-ready project makes an overdue dredging project come to life in Cotuit.
So this is the This is the barge right here. Right in the front, you can see the blue kind of gear sticking up. There's it's a large auger, so to speak, and that's chewing away at the actual material, and then it gets sucked in and pumped through. It's called hydraulic dredging because there's water is what is the means to actually move the material. So the material moves through the pipeline. It's about 80% water and 20% material, and then you can actually faintly see over on the island, over near the equipment, there's a pipeline that comes up and over into the island, and we've dug a dewatering pit there, which basically the water and the sediment go into. It allows the sediment to drain out, to settle out, and then the water just moves through the pit to minimize the turbidity coming out of it, turbidity being solids and being able to see through the water. So basically the idea is to get all the solids to settle out before it gets back into the environment. Once the material gets into the dewatering pit, it settles out. They take the material out, they're stockpiling it, and that's why you see mounds over there. In this particular area, they're going to be spreading it out over a fairly large area that was defined through the permitting process, and this is going to be used as a bird habitat. And again, this side of the island is owned by Mass Audubon. So they partnered with Free Bays Preservation / Barnstable Clean Water Coalition, who owns the other half of the island. So it's kind of a mutually beneficial project for them. They get to do what the birds want to see, and then on the other end, the next phase will be pumping material to the other end of the island to shore up the beach over there and make sure that doesn't overtop or, quite frankly, erode right away and break through. Basically, the idea is we're going to do a larger dredging effort to take care of what's kind of, quite frankly, hasn't been done over the last, I think we haven't dredged this area for 15 to 20 years or so. So haven't done a large dredging effort for that amount of time. So we're kind of, so to speak, reaping the benefits of that. So we're basically going to tackle it at this point, do what we can do, and then the idea is to maintain it and do lesser dredging efforts more frequently so that we don't have to do large dredging efforts in the future. But yes, the material will come back over here. That's what this spit is. It's material from the other end that has eroded away, and it just transports over to this side. Sediment transport's a reality of Mother Nature, and it's going to continue. Yeah, so we're just trying to correct that at this point and make it so that we can do whatever we can do to try to help flush nutrients out. And quite frankly, it's going to be a huge benefit for navigation as well.
Here's a look at places to go, people to meet, and things to do. The Osterville Village Library is offering opportunities for residents to get away during the winter without actually leaving Cape Cod. The library's Oculus Rift technology will provide virtual reality tours. International Holocaust Day is January 27th, and virtual reality tours of the Anne Frank House will be available from January 22nd through the 31st. The 30-minute tour will allow guests to experience the secret annex that has served as the hiding place for Anne Frank and 7 others. All Oculus Rift programs take place in the library's lower-level makerspace. Contact the library or visit the circulation desk to schedule a date and a time for a tour. Comments, suggestions, accolades? Connect with us on Facebook and Instagram. Email us or send us an old-fashioned note by carrier pigeon. Channel 18 works for you. I'm Paula Hersey, and thank you for watching Barnstable Today.